let's say, without going into the detail, just for time reasons, that we accept everything you say about the suffering of the Palestinian people. Nonetheless, on top of that, what should Israel do in this situation?
I have pondered that question.
Okay.
And I recognize that to say they should have done nothing except to end the illegal and inhuman blockade of Gaza, which Richard Goldstone described as elements of a crime against humanity, to immure 2 million people, half of whom are children, in what Israel's head of the National Security Council, Giora Eiland, described as, quote, a huge concentration camp. What your British economist, before October 7th, he described as Gaza as a human rubbish heap. The Secretary General of the...
Let's say we accept all of this, just for the sake of argument. Let's say we accept all of this.
I recognize that question.
Okay. So what's the answer?
My answer is, first of all, on one level, it's a little late in the day to be asking that question.
Constantine, he wants to live in the real world, and he won't listen to Norm. So they were just talking about rape and war, and I have this Israel as the place where terrorism started. State of Terror, I think it's called. This is page from 226. Rape was a systematic weapon in Israel's 1948 ethnic cleansing of Palestine. The Israeli historian Benny Morris documented 12 cases of rape of Palestinian girls by the IDF in 1948, but warned that these were just the tip of the iceberg. Even if the girls survived, the soldiers sometimes murdered them, as well as their fathers or brothers. Few cases were reported, yet those that reached Ben-Gurion's notice were numerous enough to warrant mention in his diary every few days. Would you like me to read more, or do you get the point? Because, you know, some people, they don't get the point, but, you know, you're living through a very interesting time in history when people might be called to account later for such things. Now, there was also this mention of 1953. The State of Israel started existing in 1948, but it took until 1943 for them to put the Holocaust into their history lessons for their kids. They had 12 pages on the Franco-Prussian War with Napoleon, and 1 page on the Holocaust, which was the whole founding story of their country, allegedly. What happened in 1953 over here in America? Did anything interesting happen? This guy became president. What was he doing? What was he doing back in World War II? Let's take a look. Because we talked about him and this book on the show before. This is Psych War. This is psychological warfare operations during World War II, including the people who first went into the camps. And if we zoom in here, who's in charge of psychological operations working over here with the British? It's this guy. We better zoom in further. His name's Eisenhower. That's pretty interesting, right? Because all the other people who worked in the operation, they're below Eisenhower. He was in charge of the whole kit and caboodle for the Anglo-American establishment, and he was rewarded because that's how you become president after World War II, when the people who funded Hitler end up handing out presidencies. So Ike becomes he becomes president, and in the same time as the psych war guy becoming president over here, that's when Israel thinks, we're going to put this into our education system, which is also very interesting, the gap in time. Also interesting is the gap in time between when Hollywood first mentions such things to the public, because you'd think they would want to come out and give you the Shoah movies in like 1949, 1950, or even the encyclopedia would want to mention it earlier than it did. So it's just interesting how one of the greatest mass murders in history didn't get very much press from the people who were writing the history as the victors. It just seems a little yet to be figured out. But thankfully, we do have one more clip. I think we are going to include that Dr. Zabrowski footage, because in the context of what we put in this time capsule tonight, I think what he's going to tell you is going to help you really have a more granular, detailed understanding on some of the major terrorist events, especially the ones that have taken place here in America over the past 20 years. So we're going to get to this clip, put it in context with everything else we had in this episode, and then we can come back and thank everybody who made this show possible.
There we are. Saw two young Israeli soldiers guarding a bank in Ramallah, of all things. And soldiers are usually fully armed, of course. And they approached them and they stabbed them to death with a knife. And for that, they were later on, beaten, tortured, and arrested and given life sentences. But when I see the picture of the two of us standing side by side, I have to wonder, which one of us is really the terrorist? Because according to this, it's certainly not him. I, on the other hand, served in the Israeli army, an army of occupation, an army of oppression, an army whose sole purpose is to make sure that he does not have a state, he does not have rights, and he dare not resist. So yes, my army has uniforms and commanders and generals, but which one of us is really the terrorist?
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come